Hello, aspiring VN developers. My name is Jacob Cumiskey, and welcome to the only visual novel tutorial you will ever need. I am the head writer, director, and programmer of a visual novel by the name of Siren's Call, and I'm here to teach you guys everything I know when it comes to actually making visual novels. This is going to be a multi-part series where I go over everything I did to make my own visual novel. It took about 4 years, 2 years of actual programming. And I'm going to teach you basically everything I know, from how to code to the actual mindset you need to have as a developer to get your project out the door in the first place. Because I find with a lot of these tutorials, they go over how to use the program, but they don't really go over the kind of mindset that you need to have to actually get your project out the door. And while my experiences are, they worked for me, they're not a one-size-fits-all cap for you and your experiences, I figure it wouldn't hurt to just share the kind of mindset I had going into this, because it was a big project, and we did ultimately end up getting it done, so I want to impart a little bit of my experience with you guys. This series is going to be absolutely free. I don't believe in putting knowledge like this behind a paywall. The only thing I ask, is that if you have any coding questions or features you'd like to implement in your own games that I haven't gone over yet, either because we haven't reached that part in the tutorial series or it's just not something I've covered, please double check in the game I made, Siren's Call itself, to see if that's something I would actually know how to program. Because you guys are going to learn very quickly, I'm not an expert programmer, but I didn't need to be. I didn't need to be an expert programmer to actually get my project done. So if it's not in my game itself, it's likely I don't know how to do it. And if I don't know how to do it, I can't help you. Cool? Cool. So, a little bit about me, your instructor, Jacob Cumiskey. 4 years ago, I had zero coding experience. And to be completely honest, I'm still not much of a programmer. I'm much more of a writer and a director than I am an actual programmer. However, when it comes to making visual novels, it has literally never been easier to turn your ideas into functional code, even if you have absolutely no prior experience programming. I was the sole programmer of my own visual novel, Siren's Call, a psychological horror game about escaping from Florida at the end of your summer vacation. Clocks in at about 8 hours of reading time, maybe a little bit more, maybe a little bit less, depending on your reading speed. And it has a very positive rating on Steam. And it's currently free. I'm no expert programmer, but me and my team got that done somehow, and I'm going to teach you how. I accomplished the main thing most aspiring devs have not been able to do, which is actually publish their game, and that's why you should care. And you should also care because I'm going to equip you with this knowledge as well. Most people don't have their first game go as well as ours did, so I want to share my knowledge with all of y'all so you can make that happen as well. And again, I'm going to teach you all this for free. Before we get into that, though, we need to talk about some pre-coding essentials, starting with the actual program we're going to be using to make visual novels. We're going to go over that program, the benefits it has over the main competitor, Ren'Py, and we're also going to go over the kind of experience you need to actually create a visual novel. And lastly, we're going to go over the most important thing that you need to have done before you start programming, and that's having an actual, completed, competent script for your game in front of you. So, Visual Novel Maker. This is the program that we are going to be using, that I'm going to be going over. It's the program I have the most experience with, and for aspiring devs with no coding experience, I believe it is superior to Ren'Py in a couple of ways. While Ren'Py is free, and does have more tutorials and a larger community that you can hit up for troubleshooting, there are a few notable ways VN Maker has it beat. And by a few, I mean kind of a lot. Now, why haven't you heard of Visual Novel Maker? Well, the first reason probably is that all the documentation, when you search, how do I make a visual novel, it's mostly for Ren'Py. Not only that, but because Ren'Py is on, like, a web form, and you download it from a web form and not on Steam itself, and Visual Novel Maker is on Steam, Ren'Py is not subject to the scrutiny and reviewing system that something like Visual Novel Maker is. So, Visual Novel Maker has been review bombed by people on Steam, but if you look at the negative reviews, maybe like 10% of them are from people that actually use the program the way it should be, and 90% are from people who have played it for 20 minutes and they're like, I don't get it. Why am I not an expert programmer yet? This is horseshit. Negative review. So, if Ren'Py was on Steam, it would have the same amount of negative reviews. Probably. That's just an estimation. There's, of course, no way for me to confirm that. But because of the negative publicity surrounding Visual Novel Maker and the lack of acknowledgement of the updates that have been taken to actually improve it, people just kind of sweep it under the rug and go with Ren'Py. Even though I believe VN Maker is the superior program. And it is the easiest way to make your first VN. And we're going to go over that. So, Visual Novel Maker versus Ren'Py. First, Visual Novel Maker has something called Live Preview, which lets you see your code work in real time. You program something in, you get your little bubble saying, I want to show text, or I want the character to appear in this many seconds, and after you put that in, you look at the little screen above your code, and it shows your code in action. It is a game changer. With Ren'Py, you have to run your program each time you want to see your code in action. And that takes a lot of time because you're going to be testing to see if your code works a lot. So that's going to make the actual development process significantly slower. Also, Visual Novel Maker is a visual-based programming application, as opposed to a text-based programming application like Ren'Py is. Now what that means is, with Ren'Py, you need to type out the code, you need to know the language, but with Visual Novel Maker, everything is in these little bubbles, and while you can type your own code in directly, you can accomplish most of making a good game just by using these bubbles. So you have a bubble that says, join scene, and if you put that in and link it to a character, that character will join the scene, and you can adjust how long it takes for them to fade in, what kind of animations. It's all there right in the bubble. So it is extremely easy to use. Significantly easier than just learning another programming language. Another big benefit that Visual Novel Maker has over Ren'Py is every Ren'Py game kind of looks the same. And that's because in order to actually change how your save menu works, how your main menu works, you kind of have to have some coding knowledge in Python, and you have to have a lot of coding knowledge to actually change the infrastructure of those menus. But with Visual Novel Maker, it's really easy to make your game look distinct, because you just use individual assets in hotspots, and you use the visual-based programming to just make your main menus, your save menus from scratch. And I know that sounds daunting, but it's a lot easier than doing that same thing in a text-based application that you need to learn a programming language for. So, one of the big negatives of Visual Novel Maker, though, is it's not free. It goes on sale to $20, $30 fairly regularly, but right now it's at about $60. And Ren'Py is free, and it does have a lot of community support, unlike Visual Novel Maker. But that's kind of why I'm making this series in the first place, because there is a gap that needs to be filled. VN Maker is a great program, but there's no documentation, there's not a lot of great tutorials, at least not by people who have actually made a published game. So this is me kind of trying to fill that role. So that negative about the limited community support, and hopefully a couple of months that will just not be a factor anymore. I know that seems a bit presumptuous of me, a bit ambitious, but that is my goal here, to educate people on how to actually use this program so that they can make their visual novels in a timely manner. Now, one negative of VN Maker is, and we're going to get into this a little bit more when we talk about common events, but it's not ideal for larger, more complex projects. If you're looking to make the next Umi Neko, and you actually have the team size and writing capability to do that, you might just be better off learning Ren'Py. But if you want to make like 5-hour, 10-hour, relatively simple visual novel, and you want to do it without it taking years of your life, VN Maker is a great way to do that. This is a negative that I kind of had to learn the hard way, because Siren's Call, while it is on the shorter side of visual novels, it has a lot going on programming-wise. It has a lot of systems, a lot of things happening behind the scenes with persistent variables and common events. So all of that makes the game run a little slower on crappier hardware. So if you're using an older laptop, or if you're using an older tablet to play Siren's Call, you might experience slowdowns because the game was made in Visual Novel Maker. But for like 99% of your player base, and for most visual novels that aspiring VN devs are going to make, Visual Novel Maker is ideal. To my knowledge, there aren't a lot of slowdowns with Ren'Py for the bigger projects, so if you really want to do something grandiose, go with Ren'Py. Okay? Alright, so those are some of the differences between VN Maker and Ren'Py. So in short, VN Maker is quick, easy to use, gives you instant feedback whenever you make changes to a scene, and it also helps your game stand out from the pack immediately, which is very, very important with indie visual novels. You don't want somebody booting up your game and being like, oh, great, another Ren'Py game, and just immediately be able to tell. You don't want that to be their first impression, because first impressions are everything. They might not even play your game once they identify that it's a game made in Ren'Py. I don't know why. Some people are shallow like that. But you kind of have to keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind that your game needs to stand out visually, and if you're just using the same save systems and same main menus as everyone else, people are going to notice that. People play lots of VNs. They're going to pick up on that. Okay, so we got our engine. We've got someone who's going to teach you how to use it. So what is the next pre-coding essential? What do you need to do before you start programming your VN? You need to read some damn visual novels, people. I wish I didn't have to, say this, but I feel like I kind of need to. There's a lot of people that play Katawa Shoujo, DDLC, fantastic games, by the way, but they play one VN and they're like, I want to do that. I want to make a visual novel. Totally fine ambition to have. And Whoops. Outtakes. Okay. I love Doki Doki Literature Club. Don't get me wrong. One of the most important games I've ever played. But it would be ridiculous if you were trying to write a novel and the only book you had ever read, in earnest, is of Mice and Men. If you want to make a good VN, you have to play lots of visual novels. It can only help. It can literally only help you make a better product. Because how that works is you play a good visual novel or a bad visual novel, and then you're like, sweet, I want to do something like that in my game. Or I don't want to do something like that. Or I really appreciated how the narrative was constructed here, or I didn't appreciate that so much. One of the most valuable games I ever played was Chaos Child, which is in the Science Adventure series, same series Steins Gate is a part of. And I did not like that game, but it informed me what I didn't want to do in my own project. So even if you play a VN that's garbage, not saying Chaos Child's garbage, I just didn't like it, but a visual novel that you didn't like, that can still be a valuable experience. And reading is fun anyway, guys. Come on. Are you really gonna make a visual novel without enjoying reading visual novels, so treat yourself. It's edutainment. It's edutainment. Educate yourself. Entertain yourself. And hey, don't know what to read? Saying, but Jacob, how do I find which visual novels are good and which ones are garbage? Well, there's this website, Visual Novel Database. It tells you everything you need to know about visual novels. It's your best friend. Wanna only read Dimpa visual novels? Good. Don't want to read a visual novel with hentai scenes? Cool. You can filter those out. You want to just read the best 10 visual novels of all time? Good. Those ones are great. It might alter your perception of what you're capable of a little bit, but go for it. Go to Visual Novel Database. Find something that speaks to you. Read it, even if it's bad. Write down what you didn't like, what you did like. Learn from it. Play visual novels, people. Please. I cannot understate how important it is. If you want to make a VN, you need to play some. So freaking read, people. Okay, after that, you're gonna need to write your game script. Yes, you, the programmer, the person making the game. You probably already have an idea of how this game should look and sound. So you are the best person on earth qualified to write it. I don't care if you can write. That's okay. Everyone can learn to write. It just takes time, just takes patience, just takes being in the student mentality. If somebody else writes it, there is a chance they will misinterpret your intentions with the work. Can't write? Well, why are you trying to make a visual novel then? Like, honestly, if you don't have any interest in writing and you've come to YouTube searching, how do I make a visual novel? That confuses me. You gotta have at least some interest in writing or some interest in narrative conceptually to make a VN. Even if you aren't the one writing it, you gotta have some interest in like what it takes to actually write one of these. And if you can't write well, that's okay. This is probably your first project. So just try and get your feet wet and learn the basics. Nobody hits it big with their first project. Not really. Even if you look at Doki Doki Literature Club, like Dan Salvato, he did Project Melee, he did a bunch of other stuff, a bunch of other projects before DDLC. Katawa Shoujo, the people who worked on that, they worked on a bunch of other stuff beforehand as well. Nobody just hits it big with their first project. So just try and get your feet wet, try and learn the basics. And there's always ways to improve your writing. You just have to work at it. There's lots of resources out there showing how you outline a narrative, how you find your writing style and the like. So I'm not going to touch on that too much. But hey, if you just want to program somebody else's script, honestly, that's fine too. Sure. But there's less room for error and less room for your vision being compromised if you just write it yourself. If there's a specific story you want to tell, you should probably be the one writing it. And don't be afraid to edit your script, to cut the cool parts. Do whatever the story needs you to do. It can't be about you. It has to be about whatever the story needs to function. Okay. And one last point, and honestly, this is the main reason right here why you should write your script first, is when you really think about it, it makes everything about making the visual novel easier. Let's say that, okay, you have an idea for what you want the characters to be like, where they're hanging out, but you haven't written the script yet. You pay somebody to make those assets, to make the backgrounds, to make the characters, and you sit down to write it, and you no longer have a need for that environment that you got commissioned, or worse, that character, or even something like that character's outfit. Yes, you can sort of like cheese something with the narrative to find an excuse for them to be in a swimsuit or a tennis outfit or a dress or whatever, but it makes way more sense just to have all of that written from the get-go so you know exactly what assets you need and at what point in time you need them. CGs. Normally, for a good visual novel, the CGs are for these marquee moments in the narrative. Character introductions, points of drama. If you don't know what the points of drama are, because you haven't written your script, you're going to pay to get a CG done that you're never going to use. So just write the script. Yes, it'll take time. Yes, it needs to be peer reviewed. It might take 3 months, 6 months. It might take a year. But you need to have something before you actually start programming so that it informs the creation of assets better. And hey, if you don't want to write that much, there's no shame in making like a 1-hour visual novel as your first project. Just get an idea that you really, really want and have fun writing it. If you don't enjoy reading, if you don't enjoy writing, I don't know why you're trying to make a visual novel. Okay, so again, before you begin coding in any respect whatsoever, you need Visual Novel Maker in some form. You need to have a hefty amount of experience actually reading visual novels. And you need a script, ideally one you've written yourself. But if you have a lot of faith in a friend's script, in someone on your team's script, go with that. But don't start the asset creation and coding process until you have a script. Alright? Alright. Once you got those things, we can get started making your actual game. Except that was a lie. Okay. Last, we need to talk about mindset. There's one more thing we need to go over, and it's the visual novel developer mindset that you need to actually get your game done. Now, this was just my mindset. If you want to do, alterations of this, if you want to change it up, add your own things, that's fine. This is what just helped me. It is not law, but it was things that I found helpful. So, take it with a grain of salt. Okay, I'm going to be real with you. The grind is a big part of it. It is going to be work making a visual novel. It is going to be work programming any kind of game. That's just how it is. But the grind isn't everything. It's also about your mindset. And it's about developing a realistic mindset about what you're capable of, about what you're trying to do with the game in the first place, and about what you're prioritizing in the game itself. Okay. So, let's start with prioritization. Doing the things in the right order. If you do things in the wrong order, your game is not going to get done. It just isn't. This is why I beg people, please get your game script done. That should be priority 1. Grind away until you have a draft of it, and your peers find that draft interesting and competent. After the script is done, you can pivot to asset creation. As long as you have somebody else working on the CGs or the character designs or the music, then you can work on coding your game script into Visual Novel Maker itself. We're going to go over that and how you actually do that in the next couple of episodes. So you can sort of program the game script in while the assets are being created. Now, until you have finalized assets, I would recommend using the temporary assets that Visual Novel Maker provides. There's a lot of really, really solid ones, and you can easily swap out the PNGs or the JPEGs with the final assets once the other people on your team are done making them. After that, prioritize coding essential features into your game's alpha and finishing up the alpha in general. Now, what I mean by essential features are things that are needed to actually get the game done. Things that are needed so that the player can get from point A to point B and experience the narrative of your game. Unessential features are things that enhance the experience, but aren't needed to actually complete the game. Think of like Highway Blossom's joke mode after you beat it, where like they make a bunch of funny jokes in the main narrative, or just like a level select. That's not necessarily essential to beating the game, but it's going to enhance the player experience, but they have to first be able to get from point A to point B. So at that stage, when you have the essential features in your game's alpha, you should be telling people about your game on social media, generating hype, building groundswell, the works. Don't be shy. I was shy, and my game paid the price for it. We still did all right, but we would have done significantly better if once the alpha got done, I revealed the game on Twitter or started going on Reddit and telling people about it or joined some Discords. And I didn't really do that until a month outwards from the game's release. So don't be like me. Don't be shy. Once you have a playable alpha, show it to people. Make a Discord, invite them in, maybe have them be your playtesters. Make sure that they want to playtest first of all. That I can't emphasize enough. And then after the alpha is done, after you've built some groundswell, interacted with people, things get a bit more lower priority and contextual. Meaning that you really kind of have to pay attention to what your game needs and prioritize that before it comes out. Read the situation surrounding your game and focus on the areas that are weak while coding for the game's beta. If you don't have the will for coding your game to be your top priority, you don't have the will to finish. Coding it should always be the top priority. If you're burnt out from doing coding and there's anything that you can do, like do that for maybe like 2 hours, maybe do that for a day, and then switch back to actually programming your game. Because it is a lot easier to finish your game once the alpha is done. Once you have it in a playable version where people can finish it, it's a lot harder to quit. It's still possible, but it's a lot harder. So prioritize coding your game. All right, so that's prioritization. The deeper you get into your game, the more it kind of just depends on what your project needs. But at the start, code. Code your script. Get those temporary assets in. Get your assets created. Generate groundswell. All right? All right. So scale. Don't bite off more than you can chew, boys and girls. Most big-name visual novels these days have dozens of people working on them. I guarantee if you're watching this video, you don't have a super huge team helping you make your visual novel. And that's not me being mean, that's just how it is. It's 2022. Most people can't afford to just make a visual novel and can script like a bunch of professionals to work with them on it. Most people aren't in that position. If you're in that position, awesome. I'm proud for you. But most people aren't. So if you have a small team, you need to start small and you need to be realistic. Your first game or your first visual novel is more practice than anything. So keep it small and keep it simple. Even if you have money to burn, people are going to appreciate and remember a shorter, more polished experience than something that tries to be a 50-hour-long epic that only needed to be around 5 hours or so. The longer you work on something, the bigger chance there is that you're going to get burned out and not finish. So keep your projects small, keep them focused, and keep them impressive. If you scale things back, then you only increase the chances of creating something people are actually going to get to read and actually going to get to play. And you want people to see your idea. So scale it back, trim the fat. If you have really, really good ideas that you just don't have the time or money to do, write those ideas down and try and use them in another project. Maybe when you have more manpower, maybe when you have a higher budget. Now we're going to get to the most underrated, but in my opinion, the most important aspect of the visual novel developer's mentality, and that is your intention with the game. I've seen some videos on YouTube that are like, oh, you can make a parody visual novel and make shit tons of money. Fuck that. You need to ask yourself, who are you making this game for? And if you're not making it for you, if you're not making it because you and your homies have a story you want to tell, it's going to be a lot harder to finish, and it's going to be a lot easier to make a project that doesn't resonate with visual novel fans, people who actually read visual novels. People are going to respect a story that you make for yourself a lot more than the 500th postmodernist parody VN made by a group of people that don't understand the appeal of visual novels in the first place. All right? People don't want another Dead by Daylight dating sim, okay? At least not people who actually play visual novels. If that's a hot take, you're gonna have to forgive me. But if you're making this visual novel for yourself, then the odds of you pushing through and completing it are a lot higher. VNs are not where the money is at. Alright? If you're doing this to make money, be a car salesman or something like that. Okay? Make sure you're making the game for the right reasons. Be honest with yourself. If only 10 people played your game, but it was made exactly how you and your team wanted it to be, would you be okay with that? Because the answer should be yes. Because you're gonna need to be okay with that. Because ultimately, even if you devote a lot of money towards marketing, you don't know how marketing's gonna go. If you made a game you're proud of, and not a lot of people play it, that should be okay with you. So you need to have your true intentions for making this in mind. And if your intentions don't line up with the reality of what indie visual novels are, then you need to do something else. So it's not all about the grind. You need to have a realistic mindset about your project. All right, so that's mindset. When you combine all these factors together, you're gonna set yourself up for success. Because this isn't a career, this is a hobby, so you need to treat it like one, be happy about it, and you'll be set. So, we got part one done, we got the introductions done, we got what you're going to need before you start coding, and we got the mindset that I at least had going into the project that helped me get this project done. So, for part 2, we're going to be exploring Visual Novel Maker itself, which is really, really cool. We can actually get into the program and start doing some coding. So, things to do in the meantime until that video is up. Play some good visual novels that will inspire or disgust you. Alright, just play something that will inform the creative process for making your game. And if you want to kill 2 birds with 1 stone, you can play my game, Siren's Call. It's free. If you play it, maybe you'll end up liking it, but more importantly, you see what me as a teacher is actually capable of teaching you. And if you see something that you like, you know, a feature that you like that you would want in your own game, or an animation, or anything, and you're just like, hey, how did you do this? I will be able to answer you. Because I was the sole programmer. There's no one I have to communicate with and be like, hey, Jeff, how'd you program that? I can just tell you. So you kind of kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Let's say you already have experience with Visual Novel Maker, and you want tech support now, and you want help with it now. The easiest way to do that is to just play my game, look for stuff that you want, and ask me how I did it. Another thing that you can do, polish up your script. There's always more to edit. There's always more to edit. You can always make that story better. Maybe don't get obsessive with it, but like, there's always things you can do to make the story better. Get some of your friends to peer review it. Read it. Get some strangers to read it. Take their advice to heart. Improve your story. Get a team together and brainstorm with them. I'm sure you have people in your life that wanted to make a video game. Create that opportunity for them. Pitch your idea to them. See if they will join you, because it is a lot easier to do this with a team of people than by myself. We made Siren's Call with myself, my wife, my best friend, a bunch of freelancers, and essentially everybody I know from high school was a playtester. So reach out to people, tell them your idea, be annoying about it, and see if they want to work with you on it, because it's a lot easier to get this done if you have more people on your team. And last of all, have fun. You're about to start something awesome. If you are still with me, even after the little slide about mindset, then congrats, you are in this. You can make a visual novel. Like, anybody can do this. And even if you don't have a lot of money for assets, there's free assets basically everywhere. You can just craft your story around your budget. You could make a compelling story with like Microsoft Paint drawings. If your script is good enough and it doesn't overstay its welcome, you can do that. So, yeah, you can make a visual novel. It is possible. And we're going to get into how exactly you do that in the next episode. So, I'll see you soon. And one last little thing I wanted to show you guys is that, believe it or not, this was made in Visual Novel Maker. Yeah, I wasn't using PowerPoint. So I made this presentation in Visual Novel Maker. I made my game's trailer in Visual Novel Maker. It's an incredibly flexible program. So if that doesn't sell you on why we should be using this, I don't know what will. But yeah, this is Jacob Cumiskey signing off, and I will see you in the next one. Take care.